Here we go again. It is another week of the Sports Rush. Welcome to it. I am Brett Rump, and we are right now on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, wherever you have found us. I thank you very much for taking time out of your Sunday to join us here live each week. We try to get in one live weekend edition, and then during the week, we try to give you some mini clips as things happen in the world of sports. Sometimes it might even be pop culture like this past week, we lost some legends, not only in pop culture, but in entertainment, and you could say sports, as we had the losses of Ozzy Osbourne. We had the loss of Theo from The Cosby Show, Malcolm Jamal Warner. Is that Malcolm Warner? And then we had the loss, of course, of Hulk Hogan earlier this week. So we've had some special videos through the week. We've had two or three times each week where we try to jump in and do uh, a special video. You'll see plenty of shorts that hopefully are scrolling along your page, but be sure to go to our channel at Sports Rush with Brett Rump, which is actually at Brett Rump. That's where you find our channel, is at Brett Rump. Make sure when you're there, you hit the subscribe button, you hit the like button, you hit the bell, you make a comment. We would love to hear from you. If you're watching today, jump on, make a comment. We want to hear what your questions might be, what your comment could be. Shannon Griffith, the coach, is going to be joining us coming up in a little bit. We're going to get Griff on to talk IU. Of course, for those that aren't familiar, Griff is, I guess, almost professionally covering the Indiana Hoosiers now. And so we'll test his knowledge on what to expect from this year's edition of the Indiana Hoosiers, especially the new quarterback. I mean, you got a great year out of Curtis Rourke that a lot of people maybe didn't see coming. Now you've got another transfer quarterback. What will he bring? A lot of lofty expectations. In fact, I was hearing earlier this week talk of him being on the Heisman watch list. So we'll get Griff's take on what the Hoosiers have, if there's anything they're missing, what are their chances of making a back-to-back years in the college football playoffs. All of that is coming up on today's show. Also, some action. Right now, the Indiana Fever are taking on the Chicago Sky, and the Fever are going to wrap up a 93-78 win over a depleted Chicago lineup. That is a lineup that doesn't have Angel Reese, doesn't have Haley Van Slith, whatever her name is, and then they also lost Vandersloot for the season, so they're hurting with injuries. Now the Indiana Fever, of course, playing without Caitlin Clark, so they're dealing with injuries of their own, but they do cover the spread today with a 93-78 win in Chicago. By the way, did you happen to catch the game on TV? If you're watching on ABC national television, there was the man, the myth, the legend, John Nolan, former TinCaps broadcaster. And I don't know if he's current Mastodon's television broadcaster or not. I guess we have to wait until the season gets closer before we know whether John Nolan. Right now, he's a contract holdout. Actually, I think he's just trying to figure out what his winter schedule is going to look like. But John Nolan, of course, had to leave the TinCaps because his schedule was not going to allow him time to maintain his responsibilities with the TinCaps, and so he went down to Indianapolis, where he is spending the majority of his summer. What time he's not spending in Indy, he's spending in a WNBA city near you. He is traveling with the team, calling all home and away broadcasts on local Indianapolis radio. They don't have affiliations yet. If they do, hopefully it will be here in Fort Wayne on 1380 The Fan. I know we have the Pacers on 1380 The Fan, and so we would be the first if it can work out with the scheduling. But uh, during the summer, the TinCaps have first priority, and the Fever, like today, the Fever and the TinCaps basically playing at the same time. By the way, speaking of the TinCaps, Garrett Hawkins makes it 32 straight innings without allowing a run. He still hasn't allowed a run since April. He comes in, pitches the ninth inning, a scoreless ninth, and the TinCaps come from behind after 6 innings, something they have rarely done this year. What is this, the fourth time this year, I believe, that they have come from behind after trailing through 6 innings? They gave up 3 runs in the bottom of the sixth. They trailed 4-3 heading to the seventh. The TinCaps with 4 runs in the seventh, including a 2-run homer for Brandon Butterworth, which gave the TinCaps the lead for good. They go on to a 9-4 series finishing win in Cedar Rapids. And for the week, I believe, what they do, split the series, 3 games each. And now the TinCaps will come home next week. They'll take on Dodgers affiliate Great Lakes starting on Tuesday. Justin Hartsaw is commenting, yeah, Garrett Hawkins has been just pure smoke. I mean, the guy, 96, 97, maybe even hit at 98 on the fastball. It's got a good mix with the slider and curve that he'll spin up there. But the thing is, he's just hitting spots. He's giving hitters nothing in the middle of the plate that they can drive. He made one mistake on Friday night. He hung a curveball, and fortunately, the ballpark was just big enough to keep it contained because it was very close to going out of the yard, and that would have, of course, broken the streak. But now, 32 straight innings of scoreless baseball, and I think covers, what is it, 25? Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's 25 consecutive appearances now for Garrett Hawkins where he's not allowed to run. Now, they got him warming up because going to the ninth inning, it was a 7-4 game, and it looked like it would be a save opportunity for Hawkins. Unfortunately, I guess unfortunately, I'm not sure that it's ever an unfortunate situation when you score runs, but the TinCaps added 2 runs in the top of the ninth to make it 9-4, and that meant it was not a save situation for Hawkins, but he does keep his streak alive. Well, once again, we have got the comments open, trying to keep up. I know Ryan, always very busy with his comments. We appreciate that. TinCaps in the standings, they are, I believe, 2.5 games behind Great Lakes. It depends what Great Lakes did today, but the TinCaps have Great Lakes coming into Parkview Field this week, and so this will be a very big series head-to-head if TinCaps want to have any hopes of making a playoff push as it moves through August into the final week of the season at the beginning of September. So this is a big series coming up. Starts on Tuesday, wraps up Sunday. After this week, there's only 2 more home series the rest of the season. It's hard to believe that the season is like 75% done. And so hopefully you get tickets, come on out. John O'Hurley from Seinfeld is going to make an appearance in mid-August. Can't wait for that one. Friday night. It'd be fun at the ballpark. Of course, he was, was it Mr. Peterman that he played on Seinfeld? Anyway, this week the Colts got their practice started and camp opened up. They've gotten in 4 practices so far. They hit the field on Wednesday. We're back out there on Thursday and Friday mornings. And then yesterday, they late day practice. And so far, what we've learned, the position of key importance, the quarterback position, which is a battle between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. And so far, what we've heard is neither quarterback has been good enough to really get a leg up on the other through basically the first week of camp. They're going to continue to rotate first team snaps. So far, what they have to practice has been Jones, and then they flip in the second half of practice is Richardson. They then have Richardson go the first half and Jones come in and work the second half, but they've had equal amount of time with the first unit. Yesterday, neither one sparkled. They've had a problem with interceptions. Yesterday, If I believe James Boyd, and I have no reason not to, I believe he said on social media that he had them 4 for 14 and 5 for 14 on the day yesterday. Well, that's not going to get the job done for the Indianapolis Colts. They've got to find a quarterback that can complete 65% of his passes. And completing 40 to 45% is not good enough. And so right now you've got two mediocre quarterbacks battling to be the top quarterback in Indianapolis, and neither one has done the job to earn it over the other 4 practices in. And there's only what they say, like 13 practices total that'll be held at Grand Park and Westfield. It's there's not a lot of practices, and they've already gone through 4 of them. But we'll see where it goes with the Colts. Now, let's kind of break down what we've got with the Indianapolis Colts, because we know about the quarterback position, and we know about the battle between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. To me, again, you're putting Band-Aids on a major gash, and you decided one Band-Aid isn't enough, so you go get 2 Band-Aids, and you figure out which Band-Aid is going to be better than the other Band-Aid. Because I don't think this is really the answer if you believe you're building a team that can compete for a championship. And that really should be the goal, shouldn't it, for every NFL team, is to try to put together a team that can win a championship. And the problem is, I think the Colts went out and made some big moves, very non-Chris Ballard-like, to fill a couple of holes. I thought, for the first time in a long time, I have a lot of confidence in the first round pick that Chris Ballard made when he took Tyler Warren. I think the result of that might have been more the other teams than it was Ballard being a genius. Ballard did not go up to get Tyler Warren. He sat, and the other teams let him fall to the Colts at number 14. But I think Tyler Warren's going to be a stud. I just hope he's got a quarterback that gets him to his potential, because I think his ceiling is pretty darn high. I think Charvarius Ward is going to be a huge addition at corner. He's already shown out in practice. Now, the problem is, whenever you have your DBs going against your receivers and one side looks to be more than the other, the question is that a sign of weak receivers, or is it a sign of a really good defense? Because so far the defensive backs have thoroughly outplayed the Colts receivers, and Charvarius Ward is part of that. But they've got plenty of DBs: Kenny Moore, Jalen Jones, Justin Wally. All we keep hearing from coaches, Chris Ballard, Justin Wally is a name to remember. The Colts are trying to figure out how to get him on the field, because they really like what he brings. Juju Brent's back healthy, Sam Womack. Then at safety, you've got Cam Bynum, Nick Cross, Rodney Thomas. Thomas made a couple of plays defensively in the last couple of practices, but it's not been a strength. And I think with just a couple of guys, and then having a couple of younger players developed and have kind of stepped up, like Jalen Jones. I didn't think he was good when he started last year. I think as the year went on, he became better. But I still think he's a weak tackler. I think that's one area he has to get better, is in his tackling. But I do think, just by numbers, when you take guys like Kenny Moore, Cam Bynum, and just Ward, you've got the makings to have a pretty good secondary. Offensive line, what is that going to look like? Well, you've got Bernhard Raimann back at left tackle, but if you listen to Bernhard Raimann on the Fan down in Indy this week, he mentioned that the Colts and his agent not really in the same neighborhood when it comes to his future in Indianapolis. And that primarily is referring to money. So the question is, can the Colts afford to keep Raimann at their left tackle? Now, of course, we know Quentin Nelson is back at left guard. You've got Tanner Bortolini right now working at center, replacing Ryan Kelly, who's departed. Matt Gonsalves, He is now in at right tackle, replacing Will Fries. And it's interesting because the Colts are trying to figure out where their depth comes from. Do they go versatility and take a guy like Danny Pinter and have him as the backup center and backup guard? So if either one of those positions is injured, you can put Pinter in. He is your next in line among offensive linemen, but not necessarily position specific, because he has gotten some reps at both center and guard. But I think Gonzalez is going to be the one who gets the starting spot at right guard. Braden Smith, some time last year dealing with personal issues, and he is back at right guard, at right tackle. But that's a unit that's just got to get some cohesiveness, because anytime you have to replace a couple of guys in your offensive line, you've got to make sure everybody's on the same page. They're in tune. There's chemistry, and that's what the Colts have to accomplish here in their fall practice. Before we get to our list, I do want to talk a little bit, because this is starting to leak out, and I've talked about it here on the show. The Purdue Fort Wayne Mastodons men's basketball team. On the radio, we always had the schedule release show, where we went through and told you the entire non-conference schedule, one game after another. Coach Kaufman would talk about each team on the schedule and how they ended up being on the schedule, and any history between the two, or coaches he might know that are with that program. A lot of coaches, relationships with head coaches, assistant coaches all over the country. They run into them on recruiting trips. They a lot of times they've crossed paths through their careers, or they've hired somebody that the other one knows, and so they've communicated and talked about different hires. But the bottom line is, we're not going to have a single this year that goes through and tells you each game. Why? Because the Mastodons have realized that some of the schools that already have the contracts are announcing games. The Mastodons still have some games that have to be T's crossed, I's dotted. And the Mastodons don't want to announce a game that isn't officially final with the contract in the file. But everything's agreed to. They schedule drafted up. I may or may not have seen it. But I can tell you that there's been some games already announced on social media. And so we can give you some of the games. First of all, I can tell you that the Mastodons are going to start their season with 2 guarantee games. Now, this is something that I don't think has ever happened. I don't think Coach Kaufman has ever wanted it to happen. I don't think he really likes to have the chance to start out 0-2. So usually if one of those first 2 games is a guarantee game, the other one is usually one of the non-D1 opponents. But this year, they are challenging themselves. They are going to open up on Monday, November 3rd, and they will have a guarantee game against a power opponent to be Richmond. Can't tell you who it is. Sometimes you're sworn to secrecy. But I can tell you who the Mastodons play in that second guarantee game, because that one's been announced. I saw that one leaked online, so I'll go ahead and tell you that on November 7th, the Mastodons will travel to Columbus, Ohio to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, first thing I did was I looked at November 8th, that Saturday, to see, is Ohio State in town, out of town, football-wise. They're out of town. In fact, they're at Purdue. So while you've got the Ohio State football team playing Purdue, you've got Purdue Fort Wayne playing Ohio State in basketball. But that is opening week on Friday in Columbus. So Purdue Fort Wayne Mastodons fans, this is your chance to see some Big Ten basketball and see how the Mastodons stack up against the Buckeyes. That is on November 7th. And then 11 days later, on November 18th, a Tuesday, for those that have travel issues, not the best day. But on a Tuesday, the Mastodons, November 18th, this would be the week prior to Thanksgiving. You would have the Mastodons in Salt Lake City taking on the Utah Utes. And then December 21st has been announced. This will be the Mastodons' last game before the Christmas break. In fact, it'll be their last non-conference game. The Mastodons will take a short trip to the Northwest. They will play at Notre Dame against the Fighting Irish on Sunday afternoon, December 21st. So what we know so far, the big games that have been leaked or announced. Ohio State is November 7th. The Utah Utes is November 18th. And Notre Dame is December 21st. That from the Mastodons. And yes, Ryan, Coach Kaufman is going to join the show once we kind of get more of the schedule out there and give us his thoughts on the opponents and everything. Plus, we are going to get to meet some of the Mastodons. They'll be joining the show as well. That will either be on our regular weekend live show or we might do some special videos on that. But one way or another, we'll make sure everybody meets the Mastodons. Had some fun actually talking to a couple of the guys. Of course, Yuval Levin, who is the gentleman out of Israel, about 6'5", 6'8", a guard or a wing. He's more of a 2 to 3 man, could play the 4, prefers not to play the 5, probably not a point guard, but he can help you on the perimeter, even though he's 6'7", 6'8". And then you've got another guy in Kaba, Ibrahim Kaba, or Ibrahim. I noticed he pronounces it Ibrahim Kaba. Transfer from St. Bonaventure. He will be officially a freshman because he redshirted for the Bonnies last year. And he's 6'8". And then the big kid down low, he and I remember Quentin. Quentin Morgan is his name, but I called him Quincy on our first video. Quentin Morgan, and he is 6'9", if not 6'10". He is a big kid and not bulky. He is built like a 2 guard, but a strong enough body to compete at the college level out of high school. He should be an exciting player as well. And he's a guy that could probably help protect the rim, probably will entertain some fans with some dunks and some rebound putbacks down low. It's a group that if they get the 3-point shot, which is always one of the keys for the Mastodons, if they get the 3-point shot and they get it to fall, you got to feel good about what Coach Kaufman's been able to do, replacing some really big pieces with Jalen Jackson, Rasheed Bello, Eric Mulder, all either graduated or transferred. All right, and CJ Hadnot is back. I don't want to ever overlook guys that return. Max Nelson and CJ Hadnot and Mason Shroud, who was a redshirt last year. Don't want to overlook Chris Morgan, who has been on and off injured throughout his career. I mean, guys that return, D'Angelo Elise, they're just as important as some of the new guys. We focus on the new guys because we're trying to get to know them. But a lot of important players that did stay here in Fort Wayne. All right, got to keep this sucker moving. And I've got a guest that's standing by ready to join us. Of course, we want to talk football. It's fall. Well, it's not fall. I can't kid myself. We can pretend like it is football season, but it's still summer. And there he is. Coach Griff. It's always funny, Griff, because football season, high school football, always jumps up on me so quick because I feel like I'm enjoying the second half of summer. And here we go, Friday nights. We're only, we're less than a month away.
Yeah.
Friday night high school football. and that means we are about 1 month away from college football, and camp has started for NFL football. A lot going on. It's a busy time of year, and I can't wait for it.
It's a great time of year. It always coincides with the Brickyard 400 too. I always think is when the Brickyard 400 usually runs, you're about ready to get things rocking for all the different football, NFL.
Well, they moved that race around, Griff. It was one year. I think it was the same weekend as opening weekend of the NFL, because I think that was when the Colts were out in Los Angeles or something, and they were running the race. And then they moved to August, and then ended up too hot in August. They moved it now back into July. But it does kind of. They're trying to figure out the spot for it, so it's not a conflict, but it is near the beginning of football.
Yeah, they initially had it back in the day in July, because when I was coaching at Ball State, it was usually running the day they normally report to start camp back in those days. So yeah, it's back to its normal positioning, I guess you could say. And it's hot out, which means it's starting football season. Now we wait till about Wednesday or Thursday this week. We'll probably get a little taste of fall, because it looks like we're going to have highs in the 70s and lows in the 50s. So stick around, Indiana. It changes every few days.
By the way, anybody watching can probably see we're not Generation Z or Gen Z or whatever, but our generation, it's been kind of a tough week for us, Griff. I mean, we lose Theo from the Cosmic Show. We lose Ozzy Osbourne. I mean, we grew up on Ozzy, so to speak, and then you add on top of it Hulk
Hogan.
I mean,
Chuck Mangione.
And then Chuck Mangione.
That's right. I mean, it's crazy how much
which people, anybody that's half our age or younger, has no clue.
No idea.
Chuck Mangione is. None.
Google.
We talk about him like he's a household name.
That's right. But the big two would be Hogan and Ozzy Osbourne, because those were the two prominent names in our age group. And I guess we call it the day in the 80s. It's, everybody was very familiar with in their special arenas of expertise. And yeah, it kind of was a gut punch. That's what I was telling my wife this week. I said, the heroes and icons we took it on the chin this week.
You've been keeping yourself busy over the last couple of years. It just seems like you become more and more involved with Indiana University, and especially Indiana University football coverage. I can't even keep track of what all you do because you've got different podcasts. Sometimes there's different names. I'm trying to keep up, Griff. Why don't you share exactly what all you're doing to keep fans abreast of the Indiana Hoosiers?
Yeah. Well, I moved over to the Hoosier.com, which is now a part of the 3 network, and working there with those guys. And then I'm with Jim Coyle with a post-game show for Indiana football as well. And then I do some things with his weekly radio show on Thursdays with Indiana football specifically. So mostly with that group now. Been pretty interesting time, as they've only grown over the last few weeks. I mean, they just bought out Rivals, so they're now Rivals is a part of the On3 network, and Rivals is really well known for their recruiting apparatus in terms of tracking high school football and things of that nature. So been with them now for about a year. Enjoy it. And you're right. I mean, it's crazy. I didn't go to Vegas. I was going to go, and then I kind of checking out towards the end and say, I don't want to go out to Vegas. I can watch it right here on TV, but the Big Ten Media Days. But Yeah, I've been doing that now for just this year. I was with the Believe Network prior to that, and Jim Coyle had talked to me about coming over to the Hoosier.com, and we sat down and talked some more, and lo and behold, I'm with the Hoosier.com now.
It's interesting. Having it in Vegas, I would definitely love to go to Vegas. The only problem is if I had any kind of heater going at the tables, I would not be at
Yeah.
any press conferences.
No.
I'd still be sitting at the tables. So probably not the best place for me to go cover Big Ten media days. But let's let's talk about the Hoosiers coming off that season a year ago. You want to be cautiously optimistic, but there is still, I think, a certain feeling in the back of the minds of Indiana Hoosier fans. Can lightning strike twice, or is it even lightning? Or is this a new era? I mean, you really you don't want to get your hopes up based on one season,
Right.
but yet Kurt Signetti keeps selling you the idea that this team is legit and here to stay. How much should Hoosier fans believe that this team has another shot to do what they did a year ago?
Well, there's no question that the way Coach Signet believes and the way he handles his business is that he always believes he has a chance to win, and that's what he expects to do. And he did it last year and was very open about it, and he was able to deliver, I guess you could say, on that. The team that he's got coming in this year, in some respects, may be better on paper. Well, I always say you have to wait and see between the white lines what happens. But, I just did a podcast last week on the 3 games that I think will have a defining imprint on Indiana's season this year. And it's their first 3 Big Ten games as they've got Illinois at home, who is picked 4th in the Big Ten. Then they go to Iowa, who's picked right behind Indiana. And then they get a trip out west to Oregon, who's picked right now 2nd and some 1st overall. A few weeks will have a defining imprint on how far Indiana goes this year. I think they have an excellent chance of going at least 2-1. Now, some are going to say, well, what about 3-0? Well, it's not off the table, but when you look at it on paper and where they've got to go, it's not easy winning at Iowa, and it's not going to be any easier winning at Oregon, which is probably the loudest stadium, Ohio State and Penn State in the Big Ten. So if come out of those 3 weeks 2-1 and be 5-1 overall, then I do think they have a chance of going back to the college football playoffs with a date in November against Penn State, which could be a monumental game if things fall right. But I think with what they've got on defense coming back and what they've added, their only concern maybe at linebacker, because they lost the Walker kid to graduation, but they did pick up their secondary should be really good. And their defensive line, I think they replaced CJ West and a couple other guys. Offensively speaking, up front may be their best offensive line depth-wise that they've had in I don't know how many years. They do have a legitimate at least 7 to 8 guys that can play in the Big Ten and are Big Ten bodies. That is not something we talk about very much about Indiana when it comes to the offensive line. And then you got Elijah Surratt back on top of some others at that position at wide receiver that I think will be very good. And then, of course, Fernando Mendoza, who is the brother of Alberto Mendoza, who will be the backup to his brother this year. But Fernando's coming from Cal, over a 3,000-yard passer, only threw 4 interceptions last year at Cal, but he suffered 42 sacks. So, he was beat up at Cal with an offensive line that was very suspect. But his stock has really risen since his move to Indiana. There are some services that project him as a round draft pick. You mentioned earlier potential of being on a Heisman watch list. And so he has every throw in the book. He can make all the throws that you want. I do think it's just a matter how well does he sync with the offensive coordinator Shanahan and Coach Sig's offense. And we saw Curtis Rourke do that a year ago, and that really made him go. And it doesn't matter what level you're at. If you got a quarterback that can do the things that they're capable of doing, you got a great chance of winning at any level. And I think and believe that Fernando has that ability to take what Curtis Rourke did a year ago and actually maybe improve upon that, because he's going to be more mobile than what Curtis was. And then you look at the running back room, they got Roman Hemby. He's a kid that transferred in from Maryland. He is a legit NFL type of player. Black, the kid that returns, a guy that saw some action last year, but because of their depth was very limited. And then they got the transfer BB from Alabama, Birmingham, and he can flat out fly. So when you put it all together and you look at it on paper, they have a talented, too deep offense, too deep defense to go and do as good as they did last year, but it will come down to how well they do against Illinois, Iowa, and Oregon when it comes to the Big Ten and the college football playoffs.
I found it fascinating listening to Curt Cignetti at Big Ten Media Days and talking about Fernando Mendoza, because everybody is talking so highly, and I think a lot of people that support the program are so optimistic on what he is capable of doing with this offense. And Curt Cignetti said, well, he was pretty good. I had a chance to look at his film, and he was pretty good at Cal. He's got some things he needs to improve. And then he said, but the last week of spring practice, he did pretty well. And I thought it was interesting that he specifically pointed out just the last week of spring practice. I don't know if Mendoza, if it's one of those coaching things where you really jump on a kid and you get critical right away to bring him down a little bit so you can build up. But I thought it was kind of an interesting choice of words that Cignetti said, yeah, the last few practices of spring practice, he was kind of good. He was a little bit better for us. What really do you expect from Mendoza? I mean, like we've said, we've seen projections. That some sports books will give you the bet on whether he's the number one pick in the draft next year. Heisman Trophy watch that he's potentially going to be somebody to watch for the Heisman. Is that too much hype? Is that too much pressure, or is it deserved and earned?
Well, I do think has earned it based upon what they've been able to evaluate of him based upon last year's film at Cal, because what he did there was tremendously impressive just because of the number of the times that he was sacked, and he only threw 4 picks. So he's a high proficiency guy, pro style type of quarterback. Now, what I think Cignetti was referencing about his practice performance in spring, it took him a better part of spring practice, except about the last 4 or 5 practices before he firmly understood the offense well enough that he could execute without thinking. And that's the whole thing with Cignetti. That he wants players that don't have to think, and he wants to play at their optimal speed at all times at any position. So I think that's what he was referencing with Fernando. And Curtis Rourke went through the same thing. And he almost said the same thing about Curtis a year ago. Wasn't really impressed until he got about the last half part of the spring practice, because they were making too many mistakes and bad stuff. But as far as Fernando's ceiling, I think it's very high, and it will all depend on can Indiana protect him, which I do think they have a line to do that. They showed that last year with Curtis Rourke, and I think the biggest thing that Fernando will have to learn, coming from a school that he got hit quite a bit and would have to vacate the pocket relatively early, is being able to stand in the pocket, let the play develop and bail too early. And that's something that have to settle in with what he's got there at Indiana. But that sometimes is a hard thing for a quarterback to break a habit of, especially when you've, kind of muscle memory has been getting, waylaid in the pocket for the last year. So I think if he can do the things that Coach Signetti and Coach Shanahan likes to do, he's got plenty of weapons on the outside and handing the ball to. And you add a couple of quarterback runs in the equation that they didn't have last year, or moving the pocket. I think the ceiling's high on him.
You know what I just realized? And see, I'm learning technically how to produce this show a little bit because I'm kind of on my own as far as
That's right.
producing the visual aspect. But what I've learned, my monitor is on my screen way over to that side, right? Yet I have myself positioned so when I look this way, I'm actually looking away from my guest. It would be,
Don't worry.
yeah.
I do the same thing. It doesn't matter.
I'm analyzing this, thinking it looks like I'm ignoring him, like I'm just turning my head like a dog. That's how your dog sometimes will not listen; it'll just turn its head and act like it can't hear you.
Yeah, exactly. I get that a lot around my way. Maybe my dog, maybe my wife.
Yeah, I would get it from my wife, but she's not here. So the new college football playoff format, is that taking place this year with the Big Ten getting 4 spots or whatever?
No, they're trying to get it.
I want to ask you this though, because I'm not going to quiz you on the whole arrangement, but because I know now they're dropping the seeding, the old seeding system,
right?
But I do want to ask you this: now that Indiana has made it as a 1-loss team, do they have a shot to make it as a 2-loss team? Because now people will believe in the Indiana product and everyone will acknowledge that it's not just the schedule. Because last year, I think there was some reservation about Indiana because they only had a couple of tough games and they lost one to Ohio State.
Yeah.
But this year, can they make the college football playoff with 2 losses?
The short answer is yes, if the 2 losses are Oregon and Penn State. If they are, if they have more losses behind that, I think it's very doubtful. Last year at this time, when you looked at Indiana's schedule, you had the defending runner-up in the national championship game, Washington, on the schedule. You faced a Nebraska team that was a top in the top 25 or top 15 in preseason a year ago. And you had Michigan coming in, the defending national championship team. And everybody thought, wow, that's a pretty tough schedule for Indiana. Well, as soon as the season started and things started rolling like they did, and they boat raced Nebraska and Washington, all of a sudden assumed that they had a poor schedule. And that was the furthest from the truth in that regard. But the debate on strength of schedule, who you play, who you don't play, I mean, that was part of Signetti's comment at the Big Ten days when he said, we just figured that we had adopted the SEC philosophy of scheduling. And the reality of it is what he said was exactly true. The SEC plays 2 G5 teams and 1 FCS team in their non-conference schedule. Their 4th non-conference, they try to cross with an ACC school or Big 12 school. And now the Big Ten coaches are saying, wait a minute. Instead of saying that's your 9th conference game, you have enough conference members now that you play your 9th conference game and only have 3 non-conference games. And that's the big uproar that you're hearing when it comes to the potential expanding to 16 and having 4 AQs and all that good stuff. But
it makes it very difficult in evaluating teams from conferences against one another.
Yes, and that's the whole thing that they're trying to get the whole philosophical approach is trying to take out of the hands of the college playoff committee and all the subjectivity that goes into thinking, what does an 8-conference team versus a 9-conference team, what are the differentials in that, and so forth and so on. The whole argument on that center. Now, whether that is going to get rectified. I think they have a timetable to get it done so they can have it in place for next year where they move to 16 teams. But the Big Ten is even talking about having a championship weekend that lasts the first week after the last season game, where you'd have 3 play 6 and 4 would play 5, and they call them in games, and that would potentially get them in the AQs. So there's a lot of things out there right now when it regards to the playoff, but they're going to be at the 12 this year. You're going to have the same argument that we always have because if it's not Indiana this year, it'll be somebody else. I mean, it's going to be somebody else. It could very well be a team like Iowa or a team
Alabama was the talked about team a year ago.
Yeah,
I think even more so than Indiana.
Yeah, but then Michigan went to the bowl game, hammered them, which a team that Indiana beat, and that took that out of the equation real quick. But the SEC doesn't want to think that way. They're very. I'm sorry, and this is not because I cover Indiana at the Big Ten. The SEC has always had an overinflated opinion of themselves and their conference from the word go. Down south, they just say it's different. Well, they haven't won the national championship in 2 years, so that's number one. So let's lessen the talk about how good the SEC is, and that's the thing that we're getting into now with the Big Ten, the SEC, ACC, and Big 12. Everybody's saying we're better than this and we're better than that team, and that's why they want to have this even playing field that if everybody plays 9 conference games, you get 3 non-conference games, you get a conference championship. Now, if nobody wants to play a championship, or if, the ACC says we're not going to play one because it's not valued, then we're not going to play conference championship. So you're either going to play it or you're not. Jim Franklin thinks Notre Dame should be in a conference. He doesn't think Notre Dame should be given any type of leeway because they're an independent, because they don't have the schedule that the other schools have. So it'll be an interesting dynamic. But for Indiana, I think it comes down to Illinois, Iowa, Oregon, and how they do in those 3 games. Now, they got a tester coming up against Old Dominion, who went to South Carolina a year ago. And South Carolina barely beat them 23-19. So it's not like you're just going to put 3 wins on the board and then skate to week 4 against Illinois. So there's a long way to get there. But I believe Sig is a darn good coach. I think he's got a really good coaching staff, 2 defense coordinators that they're at the top of their game. And I do believe they do have the athletic enough a team that can go compete in the Big Ten and make some headway. And their recruiting is getting better every year. So this is a thing that I think is elevating Indiana. And the enthusiasm for not just Indiana football right now, Rumpy, is Indiana basketball with the hire that they made with the Fries. There's no bigger time in that you have seen the excitement for 2 of their big sports at Indiana like they are right now. I mean, it is very, very exciting in and around the state for those 2 programs right now, and it's because they've hired.
Yeah, and of course, after the word came out about Anthony Leal and Luke Goody, and neither one getting their medical redshirt approved, it is a whole new team for Coach DeVries down there at IU. So nobody knows at all what to expect other than the coach's kid, Tucker DeVries. He's a pretty damn good ball player. Other than that, it'll be let's see him play and see what we got. But we feel like maybe we've upgraded from Coach Woodson. Never worked with Coach Woodson.
No,
just the wrong hire. That was, once again, IU fans and IU even trustees believe the only one that can bring Indiana back to national prominence is an IU guy. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm anxious to see what Coach DeVries does.
And he's a guy that's kind of got a Signetti resume coming, out of Creighton, where he was the coach there for a number of years, got his chance at West Virginia. And was only there for 1 year, and then this position became available, and he was the hot name. But these 2 guys have kind of opened way for the coaches that are at other levels, because there's really good coaches at any level, whether it be football or basketball. And these guys are just looking for that opportunity to move forward. And these two guys are kind of the trailblazers of saying it's okay to go to a group of 5 school and hire a football coach or a basketball coach, especially if they know how to win.
All right, we've got to talk a little bit about high school football. And media day a little over a week ago, and you got to be there for the entire session. I got to be there when, well, most of the teams that were still there were just wanting to get dinner. But now I will give you kind of my one takeaway that kind of stuck with me, and I want to get your thoughts on anything that really stood out for you out of media day, of anything to expect or any surprises. But the one thing was Coach Kurt Tippmann, who I trust. He's always been really open and transparent. The fact that he said we've got some really good running backs and our offensive line is intact, returns, and he thinks it'll be a real strength. Now, I know they've got a couple of holes to fill defensively. He didn't feel that concerned about that. But when you've got Snyder talking about an offensive line and a running game, because every year Snyder has made it to state the one constant, Coach, and I know you know this before I even have to say it, the constant is they've always had good offensive line play and could run the football. And Coach Tippmann feels like this is another one of those teams that's going to be led by the strength of perhaps of their offensive line.
Yeah, he was very optimistic when we spoke to him. Also, which the Burton kid who was last year, came on kind of late, and he's a legit big time running back that Fort Wayne's going to get to know for about 2 or 3 more years, which is kind of scary for the other SAC schools. But
and he's got that stud, but he said he's got 2 or 3 guys that he feels pretty good about.
And they always have, they've always had a pretty good stable of running backs. Now, the question is, do they have a quarterback that can not only distribute the ball to the running back, but can distribute the ball effectively in the passing game? That will be the question mark. The one thing that stood out to me more than anything, especially when you talk about offensive line play, there were a lot of teams that talked about how good they're going to be up front in the offensive line. Bishop DeWanger was one of them, and he really likes the ball club he has. Last year defensively, they were really good defensively, and they had a pretty good offense. And he says they're much.
And they had injuries at quarterback. They had 3 different players that ended up playing the quarterback position. And you know how difficult that is to rotate different guys at that key position.
No question. And they're a year older now at DeWanger, and he's really high on the ball club he has there. So I think when I heard more coaches talk about their offensive line, I was really taken back by the number of schools that actually said those was one of the first things out of their mouth was their offensive line. Northside, Snyder, DeWanger, and some other schools that mentioned the same thing. So that adds an equation to the game that we may have not seen for a while, that if we've got some really good offensive lines in the Summit Athletic Conference, we're probably going to see some pretty good offense, especially in the running game. So it'll be interesting how it all shakes out. It's going to be a dogfight, doesn't have Jimmy anymore. That's going to be an interesting story line there. Interesting to see what Northrop does, because they always got the talent. You got the Guilford kid going to Ohio State now. So, again, I think it's going to be a great high school football season that we both get to be a part of each and every Friday night, not just in the SAC. We do some NE8 and ACC schools too. So we cover quite a bit.
Foster kid. It's going to be somebody we're talking about. This Phillips kid, the freshman up at East Noble, Austin Phillips. He's going to be a guy that's going to be fun to have to watch for 4 years up in Kendallville. So there's going to be plenty of players that we're going to get excited about that we probably won't even mention before the season begins. But looking forward to it, Griff. Appreciate the time. Pardon?
I said absolutely looking forward to it.
We'll see Friday, but is it August? What date is that?
I'm going to say, is it 25th or 18th? I can't remember.
Man, oh man.
We're too old for this. We got to have it.
I should show up at least partially prepared. August 22nd.
22nd. I was close.
22nd is officially the first day of high school football. We'll be all over it. We'll have our Parkview Sports Medicine tailgate pregame show, and then we'll have a game, and it will be posted online at 1380thefan.com sometime fairly soon.
Fairly soon. Pre-post.
Fairly soon,
hopefully. We have the pregame, we have the game, and then we have the postgame. So we have it all again this year.
Yep. All right, Griff. Appreciate you.
Yep. You too, buddy.
We'll be in touch.
All right, partner.
That is Shannon Griffith joining us here on the Sports Rush. Once again, earlier today, a couple of fine scores. The Fever had some sluggish moments, and they kept letting Chicago hang around, but eventually they beat a depleted Chicago Sky team, 93-78, covered the spread. And so the Fever get a win that they really need, because they got to keep stockpiling some wins to get themselves in a good position for when Caitlin Clark does return, which at this point we expect at least 2 more weeks, maybe more like 3. But when Caitlin Clark comes back, you don't want the team to be fighting for a playoff spot, putting more pressure on her. You want them to have a good, secure position well into the playoffs, and they've got to take advantage of a weaker, softer schedule here over the next couple of weeks. So they get the win over Chicago, a team that's really bad right now. Angel Reese did not play. She is out injured. Caitlin Clark did not play. ABC probably to have this game at the United Center on a national television stage. But the Fever get the win, and the TinCaps wrapped up their road trip to Cedar Rapids with a win today, 9-4. And now they'll pack the bus and head back to the Summit City, where they start a homestand at Parkview Field. 6 games coming up against the Dodgers affiliate, the Great Lakes Loons. And the Loons will feature a couple of guys that I think they both play in the Futures game, or did DePaula only play in the Futures game? But they've got 2 of the top prospects in baseball, Zaire Hope and Josue DePaula. And those are 2 really good, exciting ball players you'll want to see while you have the chance, because there'll be 2 of the guys that in 2 or 3 years you can tell your family, your kids, your parents, whatever. I was at Parkview Field, saw this kid play. Josue DePaula and Zaire Hope. They're both with the Great Lakes Loons, part of the Dodger system. And, of course, the TinCaps. Garrett Hawkins today added to his scoreless streak. It's now 32 consecutive innings, hasn't given up a run since April 23rd. And, 24 consecutive appearances without allowing a single run. Do you know how difficult that is? Unbelievable. Garrett Hawkins has been just unreal. And he finished it off today for the TinCaps, even though it was a 7-4 game in the 9th. The TinCaps added 2 in the top half, so they won it 9-4 after Hawkins pitched the scoreless bottom of the 9th inning. Hey, we really appreciate you, but make sure you've subscribed. We've got quite a few people right now on the stream, and if you haven't subscribed, please do that. It is absolutely, there's no bounce back, no emails, no phone numbers, there's no text, there's nothing except the kindness and the generosity that's within your heart to give us a little bit of help here on our channel as we move off mainstream radio onto YouTube, kind of starting over. It's like it's 9.5 years ago all over again. And you can really help us out by clicking on that subscribe button. And then when we do go live, you want to get a notification, then that's your option to click the bell. And the bell will notify you when there's something posted. Make sure you click the thumbs up and give us a like. We always appreciate that. And any comments that you've got, I know, Ryan, you've had most of the comments today. I can't answer every one of your questions, and some of them aren't questions. They're just comments and feedback. But Ryan, always appreciate you. And I know Ryan had to take off, but he might be catching up on what he misses by watching the replay video because the video will be posted. So if you missed any part of today's show, you can always catch up by watching the video on our YouTube channel at Brett Rump. Share it with your friends. Tell people that are sports fans in your life, if they're a Colts fan, a Pacers fan, Fever fan. By the way, the Pacers, they're going to be fine at center. I'm going to have to do a video to break that down because I scheduled for part of what I wanted to talk about today and we got behind. But the Pacers, they're going to be fine at center. In fact, overall production, I think is going to be better this year than it was last year from the center position. I mean, you look at Weissman, Isaiah Jackson, Jay Huff. I mean, they've put together a collection of players that can give significant production on any given night. And I think you add that production up and you're going to get more than you ever got from Miles Turner. And I think collectively, all of them will probably cost you less than a Miles Turner contract. I don't think it hurts at all. I don't think anybody should shed a tear over Miles Turner making the decision to run to Milwaukee. I think it works out for the Pacers. And this is not because I'm glad Miles Turner's gone. I always wanted Miles Turner to play well because I felt like the Pacers were going to commit to him. And so I was always frustrated when he didn't because I thought this was a guy that was going to be stuck with the Pacers forever. And I've certainly taken no pleasure in the fact that he's not, but it is somebody the Pacers are going to have to replace, and I think it's going to be replaced and perhaps even surpassed what they got from Miles Turner. I think the Pacers are going to be fine. We'll talk more about that in an upcoming video. We're also going to be breaking down a lot of schedule with the Mavs. We're going to start digging into high school football, much more college football. Of course, Notre Dame, they're going to be opening up their camp. They've got a lot of excitement and buzz around South Bend. You know, the center of the college football universe could be the state of Indiana with what Signetti's doing and what they're doing in Notre Dame. Last year, these two met in the college football playoff, and it might happen again. Who knows? All right. Have a terrific week. Appreciate you spending time with us today. Once again, make sure you subscribe before you part. Thanks to Shannon Griffith for joining us. We'll talk to you again. Stay tuned on the channel because we'll be posting all week long right here on the Sports Rush.